The sky over Montana had turned strange colors that night. Danny sat on the wooden steps of his back porch, his chin resting on his knees, watching the horizon with growing unease. He was 12 years old, skinny for his age, with messy brown hair that his mother was always trying to comb flat, and freckles scattered across his nose like tiny brown stars. The clouds were wrong. That was the only way Danny could describe them. They moved too fast, spinning in circles like water going down a drain, and the lightning that cracked between them burned in shades of purple and green that Danny had never seen before. It was beautiful in a scary way, like watching a wildfire from a safe distance. Danny pulled his jacket around his shoulders. The autumn air had turned cold, carrying the smell of rain and something else, something sharp and metallic that made his nose wrinkle. His parents had driven to Billings 3 days ago to visit his grandmother, who had broken her hip in a fall. They had left Danny with old Mister, their nearest neighbor, whose farmhouse sat about a quarter-mile down the dirt road. Mister was a kind man in his late 70s, with white hair and hands that shook when he poured coffee. He had fallen asleep in his armchair around 8 o'clock, the television playing some old Western movie that Danny had no interest in watching. Danny had slipped out to his own house to grab some comic books, and then the storm had started, and he had found himself frozen on the porch, unable to look away from the sky. The storm was getting worse. The wind picked up, bending the tall grass in the field behind the house until it looked like waves on a green ocean. Danny could hear the old oak tree in the front yard groaning, its branches scraping against each other like wooden bones. And then he saw it. At first, Danny thought it was a shooting star. A bright streak of light appeared above the clouds, moving from east to west across the sky. But shooting stars did not last that long, and they did not glow blue, and they definitely did not change direction the way this thing did, curving sharply like a bird avoiding a predator. Danny stood up, his comic books falling forgotten to the porch floor. The light was getting bigger, which meant it was getting closer. It punched through the spinning clouds, trailing fire behind it, and Danny could hear it now, a screaming sound like metal being torn apart, growing louder and louder until he wanted to cover his ears. The thing passed directly over the farmhouse. Danny caught a glimpse of it in that moment, just a flash, but enough to make his heart stop. It was not a meteor. It was something solid, something built, with a smooth, curved surface that reflected the strange lightning. It was tumbling end over end, pieces breaking off and burning away, and Danny knew with absolute certainty that it was going to crash. The impact came seconds later. The ground shook beneath Danny's feet, nearly knocking him down. A boom rolled across the fields deeper than thunder, followed by a flash of blue-white light that lit up the entire horizon. Danny grabbed the porch railing to steady himself, his eyes wide, his breath coming in short gasps. The thing had come down in the wheat field, the one that old Mr. Henderson rented from Danny's father every summer. It was maybe half a mile away, close enough that Danny could see a faint glow rising from the impact site, pulsing slowly like a heartbeat. Danny knew what he should do. He should go back to Mister's house. He should wake the old man up and tell him what had happened. He should let the adults handle this, whatever this was. Instead, Danny grabbed his flashlight from the kitchen and started running. The wheat came up to Danny's chest, golden stalks that had been ready for harvest before the strange storm arrived. He pushed through them as fast as he could, his flashlight beam bouncing wildly in front of him, the glow on the horizon growing brighter with every step. His lungs burned by the time he reached the edge of the impact zone. Danny stopped, gasping for breath, and stared at what the sky had delivered. The wheat had been flattened in a perfect circle at least 100 feet across. The stalks lay pressed flat against the earth, pointing outward from the center like the rays of a sun. The air was hot here, thick with steam rising from the ground, carrying that same sharp metallic smell Danny had noticed earlier. And in the center of it all sat the object. It looked like a seed pod, Danny thought, or maybe an egg. It was roughly oval, about the size of his father's pickup truck, made of something that looked like black glass. The surface was covered in strange patterns, lines and swirls that seemed to shift when Danny looked at them too long. Parts of the outer shell had cracked during the crash, revealing glimpses of something pale underneath. Danny stepped into the flattened circle, his sneakers crunching on the broken wheat stalks. The heat wrapped around him like a blanket, making sweat bead on his forehead. He could hear the pod making sounds, clicks and hisses, and something that might have been a whine, like a wounded animal. He should not touch it. He knew that. Every movie he had ever seen told him that touching strange things from space was a terrible idea. But Danny had always been too curious for his own good, as his mother liked to say, and something about the sounds the pod was making pulled at him. It sounded scared. Danny reached out his hand, stopping just short of the black glass surface. Up close, he could see that the patterns carved into it were actually some kind of writing, symbols that looked nothing like any alphabet he had ever seen. The glass was warm to the touch, almost hot, and Danny could feel a faint vibration running through it. The pod cracked open. Danny jumped backward, his flashlight falling from his hand, as the black glass split down the middle with a sound like breaking ice. The two halves fell away slowly, steam billowing out from inside, and Danny could only stand there frozen as something emerged. It was curled in a ball at first, wrapped in a thin membrane that looked like wet plastic. Danny could see movement through the membrane, limbs unfolding, something that might have been a head turning toward the sudden light. Then the membrane tore, and the creature inside spilled out onto the crushed wheat. Danny had never seen anything like it. He had never even imagined anything like it. The creature was about his size, maybe a little smaller, with a body that was vaguely humanoid but completely alien. Its skin was the color of deep space, so dark blue it was almost black, covered in tiny spots that seemed to glow faintly, like stars scattered across the night sky. It had 4 arms instead of 2, each one ending in hands with 3 long fingers tipped with claws that looked sharp enough to cut through stone. Its face was wrong in a way that made Danny's brain hurt trying to understand it. There was a mouth, wide and full of teeth that caught the light, and above it were 2 large eyes, amber-colored like honey, with pupils that were shaped like slits instead of circles. A ridge of bone spines ran from the top of its skull down its back, each one as long as Danny's finger, and a thick tail curled around its body, the tip twitching like a nervous cat. It was, without any doubt, the most terrifying thing Danny had ever seen. It was also clearly hurt. The creature made a sound, something between a whimper and a screech, high-pitched and broken. One of its arms was bent at a wrong angle, and dark liquid that might have been blood was leaking from a gash on its side. Its amber eyes were wide with fear, rolling wildly, and when they finally focused on Danny, the creature flinched away, pressing itself against the broken shell of its pod. Danny should have run. Every instinct in his body was screaming at him to run, to get away from this thing, this monster that had fallen from the sky. But he could not move. Because underneath all the terror, underneath the claws and the teeth and the alien wrongness, he saw something he recognized. The creature was a child, a hurt, scared child, alone and far from home. Danny thought about what it must be like, crashing on a strange planet, surrounded by things you did not understand, with no one to help you. He thought about how scared he would be if he were the one curled up in the wreckage of a crash, bleeding and broken, watching some alien creature approach. He would want someone to be kind to him. Danny picked up his flashlight slowly, making no sudden movements. He pointed it at the ground instead of at the creature, not wanting to blind it. Then, very carefully, he lowered himself to his knees. The creature watched him with those amber eyes, its body tense, its claws extended. It made another sound, lower this time, something that might have been a warning. Danny did not move. He just knelt there in the crushed wheat, letting the creature look at him, letting it see that he was not going to hurt it. Minutes passed. The steam slowly faded, and the heat began to dissipate, replaced by the cool night air. The strange clouds overhead started to break apart, revealing glimpses of ordinary stars between them. The creature's eyes never left Danny's face. Finally, slowly, Danny raised his hand. He held it out, palm up, the way he had been taught to approach scared animals. He did not say anything. He was not sure his voice would even work right now. The creature stared at his hand for a long moment. Then, so slowly Danny almost missed it, the tension in its body began to fade. Its claws retracted, sliding back into the tips of its fingers. Its tail stopped twitching and curled around its body in a protective circle. It reached out one of its uninjured arms. The creature's fingers were cool to the touch, dry and slightly rough, like snake scales. They wrapped around Danny's hand carefully, the claws staying hidden, and Danny could feel a faint tremor running through them. The creature was shaking. Danny did something then that surprised even himself. He moved forward, still on his knees, and carefully, very carefully, he put his free arm around the creature's shoulders. It flinched at first, a full-body shudder, but Danny did not pull away. He just held on, the way his mother held him when he had nightmares, and after a moment the creature stopped shaking. They stayed like that for a long time, a human boy and an alien child, huddled together in the wreckage of a crashed ship, while the strange storm faded and ordinary night returned to the Montana sky. Eventually, Danny knew he had to move. The creature was hurt, and even though he had no idea how to help it, he knew it needed shelter and warmth and probably food. He could not just leave it here in the field. Danny pulled back slowly and looked at the creature. Its amber eyes were still fixed on his face, but the wild fear had faded, replaced by something that looked almost like hope. Danny pointed at himself. "Danny," he said, speaking slowly and clearly, "my name is Danny." The creature tilted its head, the bone spines on its skull catching the starlight. It opened its mouth and made a sound, a series of clicks and growls that hurt Danny's ears a little. "Okay," Danny said, nodding even though he had no idea what the creature had said. "That's probably your name, right? Or maybe hello. Either way, nice to meet you." He stood up carefully, keeping one hand extended toward the creature. "Can you walk? I live nearby. Well, sort of nearby. It's maybe half a mile that way." He pointed back toward the farmhouse. "I can't leave you here. Someone might find you and they might not be nice about it." The creature looked at his pointing hand, then back at his face. Something passed across its features, something that might have been understanding. It tried to stand, using its 3 uninjured arms to push itself up, but its legs wobbled and it nearly fell. Danny caught it before it could hit the ground. The creature weighed less than he expected, lighter than a kid its size should be. Its skin was cool where it pressed against his, and up close, Danny could see that the star-like spots on its body were actually glowing faintly, pulsing in a rhythm that matched its breathing. Danny wrapped the creature's uninjured arm around his shoulders and his own arm around its waist, careful to avoid the gash on its side. "Okay," he said, taking a step forward. "Let's go, one step at a time." The walk back to the farmhouse took almost an hour. The creature's legs were weak, and they had to stop every few minutes to rest. Danny kept talking the whole time, not because he thought the creature understood him, but because the silence felt too heavy. He told it about his family, about his mother who worked at the library in town, and his father who ran the farm with help from seasonal workers. He told it about school, about his friends Jake and who lived on the other side of town, about the teachers he liked, and the ones he did not. He told it about his grandmother in Billings, about her broken hip, about how worried he was even though he pretended not to be. The creature listened. Danny could tell it was listening by the way its amber eyes tracked his face, by the way its ear holes, or what he assumed were ear holes, turned toward him when he spoke. It did not understand the words, but it seemed to find comfort in the sound of his voice. They reached the barn as the first hint of gray appeared on the eastern horizon. Danny led the creature inside. past the old tractor that his father was always meaning to fix, past the bales of hay stacked against the far wall, to the empty stall in the back corner. Danny had used this stall as a hideout when he was younger, back when he used to pretend he was a cowboy or an explorer or a pirate. He had dragged an old mattress in here, along with some blankets and a battery-powered lantern. It was dusty and smelled like hay, but it was warm and dry and hidden from view. He helped the creature onto the mattress and covered it with one of the blankets. Its amber eyes were starting to droop, exhaustion finally catching up with it. Danny sat down beside the mattress, his back against the wooden wall of the stall. He should go back to Mister's house. He knew that. The old man might have woken up by now, might be worried about where Danny had gone, but Danny could not bring himself to leave the creature alone. Not yet. Not until he was sure it was safe. He looked at the creature's injured arm, at the dark blood drying on its side. He had no idea how to treat wounds on an alien. He did not even know if the creature's biology worked the same way as a human's, but he could see that the bleeding had slowed, and the creature's breathing had evened out, so maybe it would be okay. Maybe it just needed rest. Maybe Danny was just telling himself stories to feel better. He pulled his jacket off and draped it over the creature's chest, adding another layer of warmth. The creature made a soft sound, something that was almost like a sigh, and its amber eyes closed. Danny watched it sleep as the sun began to rise outside the barn. He watched the starlight spots on its skin pulse slowly, watched its chest rise and fall with each breath, watched its tail twitch occasionally like a dreaming dog's. He had no idea what he was going to do now. He had no idea how to help this creature, how to hide it, how to keep it safe. He had no idea what it ate or drank or needed to survive. He was just a 12-year-old kid with more questions than answers. But he knew one thing for certain. He was not going to let anything hurt this creature. Whatever it was, wherever it came from, it had trusted him. It had reached out and taken his hand and let him lead it to safety. Danny was not going to betray that trust. He leaned his head back against the wall and closed his own eyes just for a moment. He would figure things out when he woke up. He would find a way to help. He always did. The last thing he heard before sleep claimed him was the creature's soft breathing, steady and slow, like the sound of someone finally feeling safe. Danny woke to sunlight streaming through the cracks in the barn wall and the sound of someone calling his name. He jerked upright, his heart pounding, and looked around wildly. The creature was still on the mattress beside him, but it was awake now, its amber eyes wide with alarm, its body pressed flat against the wall like it was trying to disappear. The voice called again, Mister, sounding worried and a little irritated. Danny grabbed the creature's arm, the one that was not hurt. "Stay here," he whispered urgently. "Do not move. Do not make any sounds. I will come back, I promise." The creature stared at him, and Danny had no idea if it understood. But it nodded, a small movement that might have been coincidence or might have been acknowledgement, and Danny had to trust that it would stay hidden. He scrambled out of the stall and out of the barn, brushing hay off his clothes as he went. Mister was standing in the field between the barn and the farmhouse, his white hair sticking up in all directions, a look of relief washing over his face when he saw Danny. "There you are," the old man said, his voice cracking with age and emotion. "I've been looking everywhere for you, boy. Woke up this morning and you were just gone. Nearly gave me a heart attack." Danny forced himself to look guilty, which was not hard because he actually felt guilty. "I am sorry, mister. I could not sleep last night because of the storm, so I came back here to get some of my stuff. And then I guess I fell asleep in the barn." Mister's eyes narrowed. "In the barn? What in the world were you doing in the barn?" "Just reading," Danny said lamely. "I have a spot in there. I like to go there sometimes when I want to be alone." The old man did not look entirely convinced, but he was too relieved to push the matter. "Well, come on then. I'll make you some breakfast. Your parents called this morning. Your grandmother's surgery went well and they'll be home tomorrow afternoon." Danny's heart sank. Tomorrow afternoon. That gave him less than 2 days to figure out what to do with the creature in the barn. He followed Mr. back to the neighboring farmhouse, glancing over his shoulder one last time at the barn. He thought he saw a flicker of movement in the shadows of the doorway, but it might have been his imagination. Please stay hidden, he thought, please. The rest of the day was an exercise in patience and anxiety. Danny sat through breakfast with Mr., answering the old man's questions about school and friends and what he wanted for his birthday next month. He helped wash the dishes and sweep the front porch and all the other small chores that Mr. asked of him. All the while, his mind was back in the barn with the creature. He managed to sneak away around noon, telling Mr. that he was going to read in his room at his own house. Instead, he raided the kitchen, stuffing his backpack with anything that might serve as food for an alien being. Bread, cheese, apples, leftover chicken from the night before, a jar of peanut butter, a bottle of water. The creature was exactly where Danny had left it, curled up on the mattress with the blankets wrapped around it. But it was awake, and it had been busy. Danny stopped in the entrance of the stall, staring at what the creature had done. It had drawn something on the floor. Using its claws, it had scratched lines into the hard-packed dirt, creating a picture. Danny crouched down to get a better look. It was a planet, a circle with land masses and oceans, surrounded by smaller circles that might have been moons. Around the planet were more scratches, little marks that looked like stars, and then, drawn with more detail than the rest, a ship. A long, elegant shape with fins and wings and something that might have been engines at the back. The creature pointed at the ship, then at itself, then at the picture of the planet. Its amber eyes found Danny's face, filled with a sadness so deep that Danny felt it in his own chest. It was showing him where it came from. It was showing him its home. Danny sat down cross-legged on the floor. "That is your planet?" he asked, pointing at the circle. The creature made a sound, a low rumble that Danny thought might mean yes. Danny pointed at the ship, then gestured around at the barn. "Your ship crashed. You are stuck here." Another rumble, this one lower, sadder. Danny opened his backpack and started pulling out the food he had brought. "I do not know what you eat," he said, spreading the items out on the blanket. "But I brought a lot of different stuff. Hopefully something works." The creature studied the food with obvious curiosity. It picked up the apple first, turning it over in its three-fingered hands, sniffing it cautiously. Then it took a bite. Danny watched nervously as the creature chewed. Its face went through several expressions, none of which he could read, and then it made a sound that was somewhere between a purr and a growl and took another bite. It liked apples. That was good, that was something. Over the next hour, they worked through the food together. The creature also liked the chicken, which it ate with disturbing enthusiasm, bones and all. It was less interested in the bread and cheese, and it absolutely hated the peanut butter, making a face that was so human in its disgust that Danny actually laughed out loud. The creature looked at him when he laughed, its head tilting to one side. Then slowly, it made a sound that might have been an attempt to copy him. It came out wrong, more like a coughing bark than a laugh, but Danny understood what it was trying to do. It was trying to communicate. It was trying to connect. Danny pointed at himself again. "Danny," he said clearly. The creature watched him for a moment. Then it opened its mouth and made a sound. It was rough and broken, shaped by a mouth that was not designed for human speech, but Danny could make out the syllables. "Dan." Danny's face split into a grin. "Yes, Danny, that is my name." He pointed at the creature, raising his eyebrows in question. The creature touched its own chest with one clawed hand. It made a series of sounds, clicks and growls, and something that buzzed in the back of its throat. Danny tried to repeat them and failed miserably, his human mouth unable to form the right shapes. The creature made that coughing bark sound again. It was definitely laughing at him. Danny tried several more times, getting a little closer each time. Eventually, they settled on something that Danny could actually pronounce. Danny said, testing the word, "Your name is." The creature made the rumbling sound that Danny was starting to recognize as agreement. Danny held out his hand the way he had in the field the night before. "Nice to meet you, I am Danny, and I am going to help you." Looked at his hand for a long moment. Then it reached out with one of its own hands and wrapped those cool, scaled fingers around Danny's. It was a promise. Danny was not entirely sure what he was promising, but it felt important. It felt right. They stayed like that for a while, two children from different worlds, holding onto each other in the quiet of an old barn, while the sun moved across the sky outside, and the ordinary sounds of a Montana afternoon drifted through the cracks in the walls. The days that followed blurred together in Danny's memory later, a mix of fear and wonder, and the constant anxiety of keeping a secret that was far too big for a 12-year-old to carry. His parents came home the next afternoon, tired from the drive but relieved that his grandmother was recovering well. Danny hugged them both and answered their questions about how he had behaved for Mr. and pretended that nothing unusual had happened while they were gone. He had never lied to his parents before. Not really. Small lies, sure, the kind every kid told about homework being done or vegetables being eaten, but nothing like this. Nothing that mattered. It felt wrong, like a splinter working its way deeper under his skin every time he smiled and nodded and acted normal. But he did not know what else to do. If he told them about, they would call the police, or the military, or whoever it was you called when an alien crashed in your wheat field. And then people would come and take away, and Danny would never see the creature again. He could not let that happen. So Danny became an expert at sneaking around. He set his alarm for 5 in the morning, slipping out of the house while his parents were still asleep to bring food and water. He made up excuses to visit the barn during the day, telling his father he was organizing the old tools or his mother he was looking for a book he had lost. He stayed up late after his parents went to bed, sitting within the lantern light, trying to learn to communicate. It was slow work. His language was nothing like English, built on sounds that Danny's throat could not produce, and had the same problem with human speech. But they found ways around it: gestures, drawings, facial expressions that turned out to be more universal than Danny expected. By the end of the first week, Danny knew the basics of story. Was a species that lived on a planet far away, so far that Danny could not even begin to imagine the distance. There were hunters, predators who had evolved to be the most dangerous creatures on their world. They had claws that could cut through stone and teeth that could crush bone and skin, that could survive in conditions that would kill almost anything else. But their planet was gone. Drew the picture one night, scratching it into the dirt floor of the barn with careful precision. A star, much bigger than the others, growing and growing until it swallowed the planet whole. The word used for it sounded like a scream. They had known the star was dying. They had built ships, as many as they could, and filled them with their children, the next generation who would carry their species forward. The ships had scattered across the galaxy, heading for different destinations, hoping that at least some would survive. Ship had been hit by something. An asteroid, maybe, or debris from another vessel. The adults on board had died in the impact, and the ship's automated systems had guided it toward the nearest planet with a suitable atmosphere. That planet was Earth. Was the only survivor. Danny held while the alien child cried that night, making those broken sounds that were nothing like human tears but carried the same weight of grief. He did not try to say anything. There was nothing to say. He just held on and let know that it was not alone. As the weeks passed, Danny watched change. The injuries healed faster than any human wound would have, the broken arm straightening itself out, the gash on side closing and fatting to a thin silver line. But it was not just the physical healing that amazed Danny. It was everything else. was growing. Not just in size, though that was happening too, a few inches added every week until the alien was nearly as tall as Danny, but growing in other ways. Smarter, more aware, more able to understand the world around it. When Danny had first found, the alien had seemed like a wild animal, all instinct and fear. Now was more like a person. It asked questions, as best it could with their limited shared language. It made jokes, that coughing bark sound that Danny had learned to recognize as laughter. It showed curiosity about everything, from the tractor in the barn to the stars in the sky to the strange device Danny called a cell phone. Danny did not understand what was happening, but he knew it was connected to him somehow. To the time they spent together, the words they exchanged, the bond that was forming between them. One night, about a month after the crash, taught Danny something new. They were sitting in the barn as usual, the lantern casting warm light over the stall, when reached out and touched Danny's forehead with one clawed finger. Danny felt a strange sensation, like a door opening in his mind, and suddenly he could feel there. Not see or hear, but feel, a presence at the edge of his thoughts, warm and curious and utterly alien. Danny jerked backward, his heart racing, made a concerned sound and pulled away, the presence fading immediately. "What was that?" Danny asked, his voice shaking. Struggled to explain, using a mix of gestures and sounds that Danny had to piece together slowly. From what he could understand, this was something that could do, a way of connecting mind to mind. It was how they communicated with their partners, said, though the word for partners was not quite right. It was more like family, like siblings. Danny sat with that information for a long time, his thoughts spinning in circles. He and were forming some kind of bond, something that went beyond friendship, beyond even brotherhood as Danny understood it. Something that changed them both. He should have been scared. Part of him was scared, but a bigger part of him felt something else entirely. He felt like he was exactly where he was supposed to be. "Okay," Danny said finally, moving closer to again. Show me how it works." His amber eyes studied his face for a long moment, looking for doubt or fear. Whatever it found seemed to satisfy it, because it reached out again, that clawed finger pressing gently against Danny's forehead. The door opened wider this time. Danny could feel some emotions flowing through the connection, gratitude and affection and a fierce protectiveness that made his throat tight. He tried to send his own feelings back, picturing them like water flowing through a pipe, and made a surprised sound. It had worked, had felt him. They practiced every night after that, pushing the bond a little further each time. Danny learned to sense presence even when they were apart, a warm spot at the back of his mind that pulsed in time with the starlight spots on skin. Learned to use the bond to share images and memories, showing Danny glimpses of the world it had come from, the red skies and silver mountains and vast oceans that no longer existed. Danny showed his own memories in return. His childhood on the farm, learning to ride a bike, his first day of school. His parents, their faces painted in warmth and love. The small, everyday things that made up a human life. Absorbed it all with hungry curiosity. And as it did, Danny could feel the alien changing even more, becoming more than it had been before, becoming something new. Neither of them knew what that something was, but they were figuring it out together. And then, one morning in late October, everything changed. Danny came to the barn as usual, just before dawn, carrying a bag of food and a thermos of hot chocolate that he had made for himself. The air was cold enough to see his breath, and frost glittered on the grass in the early light. He knew something was wrong the moment he stepped inside. The stall where slept was empty. The blankets were piled in the corner, the mattress pushed against the wall, and on the dirt floor, scratched in those same careful lines that used for writing, was a message. Danny stared at it, his heart pounding, trying to understand the symbols. The bond flared in his mind, and suddenly he could read them, the meaning flowing into his thoughts like water. "They are coming," the message said. "They found me, I have to lead them away. I am sorry." Danny dropped the bag of food. The thermos fell from his numb fingers, spilling hot chocolate across the barn floor. He did not know who they were. He did not know how new they were coming. But he knew one thing with absolute certainty. He was not going to let face them alone. Danny ran out of the barn, following the bond like a compass pointing north. He could feel, somewhere to the east, moving fast but getting weaker. The alien was hurt again, or scared, or both. "Hold on," Danny thought as hard as he could, pushing the words through the bond. "I am coming, just hold on." He did not know if could hear him. He did not know if he was already too late. But he ran anyway, his breath forming clouds in the cold morning air, his heart pounding in his chest, racing toward the only family he had left in the entire universe.